Ladies and gentlemen, it is the two ordinary cops. G'day, Schultzy.
Mate, how are you? We are now on episode 70.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy, actually. Yeah, yeah,
Who would have thought?
yeah. No, it's good. There was still plenty of feedback too, which is good. So,
Yep.
yeah, we'll just keep talking rubbish if you're happy to listen. That's fine.
Yep.
So, yeah,
Exactly right, mate. Yeah, we've got people listening to us. So, um, we must have something reasonable to say, I'd say.
yeah, yeah. No, mate, how you been? What's going on? I haven't seen you for a while.
Oh, mate. Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, it has been a while, actually, probably a little bit too long.
Mm.
Did you like the photo I sent you last night of what I'm going to buy?
Yes, we're gonna smoke some serious meat. I think that'll be good.
That's right.
Yeah, no, that's the
Yeah.
go. Have to
So,
bring up
no,
a cow to go in it.
yeah,
Mm.
pretty much, mate.
Yeah.
Now I'm looking forward to that. And of course, my missus, she goes, "Where are you going to fit it?" And I said, "I'll find somewhere. Don't you worry."
Oh no, we pride a place. We'll kick the car out onto the street and put it there.
So yeah, for
Yes.
everybody listening, on getting a big smoker, big
Yeah.
steel thing. So yeah, no, there should be some brisket and probably chuck roast and yeah, mate. I think we can throw everything in there. We can just fit a cow in this one.
All the things that put a smile on our face, mate.
Exactly
Yeah.
right.
So,
But
Schultzy, a couple of shout outs, mate.
yes, mate, we have. So we give a shout out to Jeff Sampson. Now he's lives in Bundaberg. He's retired now. He's friends with my uncle and mum and dad. And my mum and dad just went to Bundaberg recently to catch up with them all. And yeah, apparently he is raving about our podcast. So thanks for listening, Jeff. And mate, you also well know of Jeff because he was the one that made that barbecue. That we had the best day ever in Tennant Creek, I reckon.
Yeah, I know the one well. That was fantastic. That was a good day out. Just two blokes sitting out the back, cooking a snag every now and then, basically just drinking beer. And it was a bit cool, so we had the fire cranking, and I think we had about a 1 foot flame coming out the end of the chimney. So it was definitely working well.
Yeah, it definitely was. So, yeah, big shout out. Thanks for listening, and mate, yeah, get in contact if you want us to talk about anything or touch on anything. So, but yeah, very much appreciated. And mate, we've also got one from Jason Laring. You know him?
Yeah, Jason and I worked together. I'm fairly certain it was Alice Springs.
Yep.
I don't think we worked together a lot. I think we were obviously at the same station, so we knew each other fairly. Not brilliant, not extremely well, but I certainly know who Jason is. And yeah, good to hear from you, Jace. It's been a long time. It's been nearly 10 years actually since I was in Alice.
Jeez, wow, time flies. And mate, yeah, he just said, listen to episode 69. He said another great episode. And he just needed us to point the direction of the Bob Rennie series. So because he'd heard about it and of the other ones, obviously he probably hasn't listened to them in order. So yeah, so I just sent him the link for the first ones. Uh, 17, mate. That was episode 17.
Yeah, wow.
We're now on 70.
Jesus. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
So
Mm.
yeah, mate. But yeah. So thanks, Jason, for listening, and let us know. Hopefully, you did get onto the Bob Rennie series. Um, Mate, the other one is we've spoken about Nathan before. He's the one that works at McDonald's and listens to us when he's I think he's working in the cold room and all, or in the what do you call it, in the stocks?
Restocking. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, mate, he actually gave us a very, very good question. He said, "Thanks for the shout out. Very much appreciated. After listening to the last two episodes, it got him thinking about promotions. How do people get promoted? What do they have to complete to get promoted? And times when people are pushed higher in rank than they should be."
Yeah. Interesting one because I mean we like to stay pretty positive. Look, a lot of people who do get promoted actually are very good at what they do. There's a case. Of course, there are those who do get promoted beyond their ability. Um, but I mean, there's the old saying that there's nothing more X than an ex copper or an ex smoker or you get all critical. And I think that the whole idea of us is we're not super critical. And realistically, there's only a very small number of people who I genuinely didn't like at higher rank. There was
Yeah,
a lot of people who I did like at higher rank, and I thought they were quite good. And don't get me wrong, there were you question decisions constantly, but that's just good. That could also be good leadership because you know that you're safe. You're departmentally safe to actually go, no, sir, can you explain that to me? Or no, ma'am, can you explain that to me? So I think the best way, if we add a bit of structure to this, we could probably have a chat about it for quite a while, Schultzy.
Well, mate, I reckon so. So there's been a couple of comments, about getting promoted like above your ability and maybe too early and all that sort of thing. But look, there's certain people that are good in leadership roles, and mate, you and I both were sitting OICs of police stations while on probation. Because we're the only ones out there. So it's a bit hard for us to put anybody else down for being promoted probably too early.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, we were put into those roles, and
It's an acting role, yeah.
yeah,
There is a difference between acting and substantive. So
yeah,
I think
yeah.
we can cover all that. We can probably yarn about this for a while, I'd say. Yeah,
Definitely. Well, people wanted longer episodes, mate, and they
yeah,
apparently they liked the hour and a half one last time with good old Peter.
yeah.
So
No, that's good.
yeah,
But yeah, I think what I might do is I might actually talk about, for those like police are going to understand this, but a lot of people mightn't understand the rank structure.
yeah,
When you work in an organisation that is required to give orders, and you do have to carry them out. So the police is still very much a paramilitary organisation in that um, there is a rank structure, and you are lawfully required to carry out the any tasks that are given to you by a person of a higher rank.
yeah,
Now that varies a lot. There's variation, especially at the operational level, which is down low. But yeah, the military operates like this, and it needs to, because quite often you're carrying out things that just must be done, and there must be that you don't. There are times when you just have to do stuff, and you can question it later, and you can inquire all the rest of it, and of course you have input, but sometimes there isn't the time to argue the point, and you just have to get stuff done. So, as a result, there is still very much a rank structure, and I would think that police and fire are quite rigid in their rank structure. I know that we're not nowhere near as rigid as the military, and I've been in the army, so I know how that works. And we're definitely not as rigid as that. Well, certainly not with the lower ranks anyway. But I'll just explain what goes on. So obviously in a ranked organization, you've got the people on the lowest rank, that they're your workers. They're the ones who do the work. So in police, it's the constables. The constables are similar to private soldier. I don't like to compare completely the military to policing, because the army and the defence force in general operates on a bigger scale. So when you're a soldier, you're part of a section this is an infantry based army. You're part of a section that's part of a platoon, and there's a rank structure within that. But you've got more than one or two of you there. And as a private soldier, especially in the regular army, there's not a lot of decision making that has to happen. You basically just do your job. You just get good at what you have to do, and you do your job as you're ordered to do it. Policing is different. As police, we're a civilian organisation. We're still a paramilitary, but we're very much a civilian organisation. And we still have to do our job, but you do have to operate more autonomously as a police officer. So as a constable, you will generally have as a very junior, so a probationary constable, you will generally have, or you will have, a senior partner. Ideally, and the way the rank structure is set up, you would have a senior constable as your partner. So instead of a section or a platoon, we have a patrol group in general duties. That is your basic level of where you are. So your patrol group is made up of two and ideally three crews in a major area. I think I can hear the police laughing at me, because
yeah.
not many
Good luck
people
with
have more than
that,
two crews. So we're talking ideal world, and the concept behind it. I can just hear the coppers screaming at me, going, "Two crews, that'd be nice."
mate.
I hear you
I was
guys.
just
I
thinking
know.
about what bullshit are you talking about,
Yeah,
Damo?
I know. Look, it's a nice. I think I just want to talk about the way it's the ideal world situation, and
Yeah,
we'll leave resourcing to another comment. So basically, you've got your guys on the road, and I think everyone gets that. So we've got constables and senior constables on the road who are operating in a van. There'll be two coppers in the car, and you roll around like that. Now, you're pretty autonomous. You hold the office of constable regardless of the rank. So you with that comes the powers that are given to the office of constable, and your job is that you must carry out your role. So basically, practically, that works as you're rostered on. You basically are dictated to what occurs, and you carry out proactively patrolling. And I could hear all the cops laughing again now because they don't have time to do that anymore. But that's the idea. You basically go out, you operate on the road, and your job is to go out, do your job, and be tasked as is required by comms. And you're overseen by a sergeant. So a sergeant is the lowest rank that is in authority over other people. So the rank of sergeant is, I'll go, as you get more experience, you get the rank of senior constable. Senior constable is a recognition of knowledge and experience. So basically, someone can very quickly look at your uniform and see 2 stripes on your shoulder and know that you've been around for a while and you've got some experience. So they can go, well, that's a senior guy. They can work by themselves. They can probably act as a sergeant. They can do this. They can do that. So a senior constable is, there was an old saying in the Queensland Police that my uncle used to talk about. Senior constable is God on the street, because you're salty. You've been there a while. You know how things work. You know your crooks. You've been there a while and you've got that experience, and you can definitely mentor junior members. So your junior constables coming out of the college, and also your Connies who are not at that senior constable level yet, you sort of mentor them a bit. And you're still very much an operational soldier. You're on the ground and you're doing your job. You're a police officer on the ground who is a hands-on, going to jobs, but you're just that little bit higher up. And to get to that rank, so senior constable, there's time. So you've got to do, I think it was a minimum 4 years before you were eligible.
Yep, that's
So,
right.
and look, this changes constantly, and it may have changed since. 4 years on the road would get you to what we call constable first class. So you get 1 stripe just for being in the job for 4 years. Simple as that. What that was a recognition of time served and a recognition that you've been in the job for a while. Senior constable was a little bit different in that you had to either show that you could, you had an academic understanding. So we used to do a senior constable promotional exam, and if you passed that exam and you're eligible for promotion, being that you'd been in for 4 years and you had your first hook, you could promote to senior constable. They brought in different pathways for long-serving members who just worked hard and weren't all that academic and weren't interested. And basically at 10 years, you could show that you'd done a certain amount of work and all the rest of it, and you would get 2 hooks.
Yeah.
So those junior ranks, or those lower ranks that's very much operational ranks, are just indicators of experience and ability on the road as workers. Your first true supervisory rank is sergeant. So that's for those who aren't in the police and don't really understand rank structures. That's 3 stripes. So if you see 3 stripes on someone's shoulders, that means that they're a supervisor, basically.
Yeah.
And their job, they're still an operational police officer. They can still be on the road and arrest people and all the rest of it, as can anyone. But generally, the higher ranks won't do that. Your sergeant is your street level supervisor. So they're going to be in charge of 2, ideally 3 crews. I can hear you laughing. I know. So that's their role. They will approve pay, overtime pay. They'll do use of force reviews. They'll actually do a fair bit of quality control for their guys on the road. They'll provide operational oversight for more complex or more serious jobs. And we're talking purely general duties here. And that changes a little bit when you go into investigations. You're very much an investigation coordinator at that point. So you will point and shoot your members, and you do a hell of a lot of quality control. As a detective sergeant, you might interview very serious offenders. So if you've got because the other thing is with sergeant comes generally a fair bit of responsibility and a fair bit of experience, and the fact that you've proven that you can to get to that rank. So to get to that rank, basically, you've got to be a senior constable or a constable first class, and you've got to do a sergeant's course. You've got to pass an exam. Well, this is me in 2015, all right? So it may have changed now, but we had to pass an exam, which was an entrance exam to the sergeant's promotional course. That was a 2-week course in Darwin with a whole heap of prospective future sergeants. You do that, and that gets you the qualification to the role of sergeant. And there's a lot of leadership development when you do there, and personality, understanding how personalities work and how different people respond differently to different things. Obviously, a lot of legislation. Sergeant, as well, is the first rank that actually is legislated to have further powers than a constable, and a lot of that is to do with the Bail Act. So a sergeant or an acting sergeant or a person in charge of a police station, we're talking remote, are the people who can grant or deny bail at police level. So constables don't have that authority. That comes with the office of sergeant. So once you get that little bit higher, you have that ability. I'm talking very much in the Northern Territory context as well, just for those who are thinking in different states, it may differ. And at that, look, that was my favourite rank. I acted as a senior sergeant. You're very much a manager. I'll talk more about senior sergeant in a minute. But yeah, sergeant was a really good rank because it's good when you know what you're doing. You've got your crews. You know where you want to go. You know how you want to build the culture of how your patrol group responds to jobs. And you want to lead by example, but also let your guys do their job. And that's where that leadership is sort of commences. And you can really have a good impact on junior guys and really influence their careers. And you can have good sergeants, you can have bad sergeants. I'm mostly good sergeants. Sergeants were generally pretty good because they're on the road with you. You know,
Yeah.
when someone's in a big blue, they're there alongside you, and they're generally, good at it. So, city safe, especially for me as a sergeant, was quite good because what I would do I would give the orders and give them, especially in a big problem, like if we had a big all-in brawl or something in a pub, I'd have security even working for me. I'd be directing security as to what I want them to do, and then I'd have not that I have any statutory authority over them, but generally your leadership kicks in and they will do what you ask. So I could coordinate security. Can you guys do this? Right, you guys, I need you to do this. My voice only. One thing that police on the ground are very bad at times is talking over the top of each other and trying to take charge of the situation. As a sergeant, I used to go my voice only, so everyone else used to shut up and just go that, righto, we know that Damo's going to make the call and we're going to do what we need to do. Of course, you still can act spontaneously if you need to, but basically that means don't try and talk to the crook. Damo's going to talk to the crook and everyone else is going to we're going to make apprehensions, do whatever else. Dealing with tactical stuff, I used to be able to go taser. I'd even have a plan going, say, right, you guys are going to be on the taser. You guys are going to have pepper spray. You're the hands-on. You're going to be handcuffing. I'm going to be standing over the whole thing, and my body worn is going to record the entire incident. So we had a bit of a tactical plan there for a more serious little incident. It's all on a scale. We're talking about still just one van responding or two vans responding to a job. So we're not at a specialist unit response level yet, but that was the sergeant. You're the guy on the ground who knows how to do it. You've been around the block. You've got more experience, maybe a bit of specialist training in other areas, and you're now in charge of that crew. So anything to add there, mate, with sergeant? You might have a bit of remote stuff even.
Yeah, mate. So I spent for everybody listening. I finished in the police force as a Connie first class. So, however, I acted as a sergeant for close to between 4 and 5 years throughout my career. I did almost 3 years at Ramangini. Which is the remote stuff. I did
I'm just going to
Rotorua.
correct you there, Schultzy. I'll let you keep going, sorry. But when you are posted as the officer in charge of a police station, your rank is remote sergeant.
It is, yeah, yeah.
So it's not a substantive sergeant rank, but you are,
No,
for the time being, the person in charge of that police station, and your rank becomes remote sergeant.
yeah.
And that reverts back. If you go back into the major centres and you're no longer the boss, you lose that rank. But the fact of the matter is, you were a substantive sergeant in the fact that you were a remote sergeant.
Yeah, yeah. And look, I got that position basically because of my experience. I still failed. I think I sat the senior Connie exam like 4 times and failed it every single time. Only because it's more policy and procedure in the way they like you to do things. I kind of had my own way of doing things. Like they said, there's some people that follow the book. I threw the book out the fucking window. Um,
You
and
kept
I,
your job, though.
yeah, oh yeah. Well, I mean, and I gained experience. I did a lot like you did, Damo. Like we just threw ourselves into everything. And there were times, even on probation, after coming back out bush, I remember, big shout out to oh shit, Benny Rossiter.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was a sergeant there one day, and he just called me in the office, and he goes, in relation to an alcohol, in relation to a car carrying alcohol into a prescribed area, he said, "Can you just run me quickly through on how you deal with it?" And credit to him, because I was still on probation, but I'd been out bush, and that's where you deal with a lot of that stuff. And so he was smart in the fact that he goes, here, hold on, I've got somebody with the knowledge. Ask me, and it means we got the job done and done correctly, because you don't at that stage you probably didn't do it a lot in Catherine. So it's that procedural thing, and you mentioned that, but I think before we started talking, Damo, there's a real it. It doesn't mean you have to know everything. It just means you need to know who to ask to get the information to do your job, and be a good leader. So I think when me working out bush, I had all that experience of going to different stations. I learnt under a lot of different, very, very, very good supervisors, sergeants, senior sergeants, even commanders. Learnt how to, and superintendents on how to do different things. I did international requests when I was working in the family and domestic violence unit. So with all that experience plays into you getting that role, or being given the opportunity to basically be the a remote sergeant.
Mm.
And look, the my experience also allowed me, talking about, so there was, under the intervention, there was a lot of people getting sent out bush, who especially from Darwin, and not knocking the cops from Darwin, but you just don't get the, what would you say, Damo? You don't see as much of everything when you're in those bigger areas. So whereas
No,
Catherine,
yeah, you're right. You're very busy. Like I'm certainly not going to knock Darwin coppers, because I was one, and we worked our ass off. But the fact
yeah,
was that you just, um, I don't know how to explain it perfectly. So in Darwin, you've got a lot of resources outside of general duties that you can call
yeah,
upon. If a critical incident kicks off, all of a sudden you've got crews everywhere. You've got, if it's a really bad situation, you've got tactical response. You've got negotiators. You've got resources when you're in a major centre, and you
yeah,
need them. I'm not
yeah,
knocking that. You do need them, but because you're dealing with a lot, your jobs are coming thick and fast. I think, and you're completely correct. Out in the bush, you're it, for a very long time. If there's a major incident, yeah, you're going to get help, but they're going to take a while to get there.
yeah.
The
Uh,
sheer distance is going to be a problem.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I mean, to put it into context, like in Darwin, I mean, Dama, you're a coroner's Connie. In Catherine, you do the paperwork. So
Yeah, in
you,
Alice Springs, sorry, Alice Springs, I was coroner's. Yeah,
yeah, sorry, Alice Springs you were, but like the major centres, they have a coroner's Connie, whereas Catherine, and Tennant Creek, and anywhere else didn't. So you had to do a lot of the paperwork that surrounds that. And when you're out bush, you're doing everything.
yeah,
Um, so it's that sort of experience that allows you to probably act up and have a lot of knowledge when you're in there. In saying that, I wouldn't say I was the best sergeant. I'd learnt a lot, um, and still learning even today when I manage people. But yeah, back in those days, I used to get, especially from Darwin, there were a lot of people that went out bush, and there was a lot of people that knew me, so they used to give my number out to a lot of people. So I was getting phone calls for all different stuff on how to actually get stuff done. But like we mentioned before, it didn't mean that I knew everything. I knew who to call to find out what we needed to find out.
yeah.
So, and that's where you're networking. You have to be a good networker. You have to know people, in different areas, chat to them, and build a rapport with them, because then they will help you out in those times of need. And I think that's why I was probably successful as being a remote sergeant. But it's very lonely out there, because you just don't have any other resources to call on. I mean, you got your bosses, and you can call on them whenever you need to, but you've got to make a lot of decisions without having any backup very close by. So you've got to act on probably a slightly different level. Wouldn't you agree, Damo?
Yeah, I reckon out in the bush, you need to be able to manage your patch. You certainly want to be able to deal with the day to day, and even when it gets a little bit hairy, you still need to be able to deal with that. You certainly don't want to become a very squeaky wheel,
Yeah.
because then you'll end up getting micromanaged,
Yeah.
because it's a natural thing. And look, I'm not knocking a lot of leaders, but I'm mature enough to know that there is pressure from above your bosses that they need in their own mind to make sure that everything is sweet out there. And if you are forever going, help, 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 well, they're going to lose confidence in you to actually deal with shit.
Yeah.
because things are going to go wrong out there, and you're going to have to think outside the square, use the human resources that you have, maybe even call upon a neighbouring police station. They could be a couple of hundred k's away, but that's okay. You work together a lot anyway. So if you're in a situation where you can call upon other local resources just to assist, and they can assist, and we can keep the boss out of it, that was generally a good idea. But you've also got to know when you need to pull the trigger and go, no, we need help. And that's when you'd call up higher or call through, not so much even your direct command if it's happening after hours. It might be that the way that comms is set up in Darwin, everyone's got contact with Darwin Comms, which is the communications, the Joint Emergency Services Communication Centre, JESC, in Darwin. What you can do there is actually get onto the Territory Duty Superintendent, and they can coordinate high-level response out to remote communities in an emergency where basically you're dealing with an incident that is far beyond the ability or the capabilities of the local services.
Yeah.
So you need to know when to flick that switch. You just don't need to be doing it 24/7 and actually causing people to go, we actually doubt this guy's ability to deal with this stuff. Like they're being overwhelmed by things that they shouldn't be overwhelmed by. They should just be able to deal with this stuff
Yeah.
and be able to take the step back and understand that sometimes you have to just let things settle and go from there. And that's why you do learn a hell of a lot in remote areas. But I think just getting back to the rank structure, I think we'll go through the rank structure and then we might
Can I
even
just
talk about.
cut in there,
All right,
mate?
mate. Yeah, yeah, yep.
I've just got something else I wanted to add. So it was something you mentioned before. Yeah, going on about that thing. I do remember I had a senior sergeant. He was actually out at Borroloola, and anyway, I had a bit of a disagreement with my sergeant at one stage. And anyway, he was out there fishing, and he turned to me and he goes, "Oh," he said, "What was that about?" And I said, "Oh, just we had different ideas about what we're going to do." And he said, "No, she didn't get the memo." I said, "What memo?" He said, "We tell you what to do, and then you do whatever the fuck you want anyway, and then you tell us how you did it." Um,
Yeah.
so I mean that's kind of the way I roll. I used to do a lot of stuff and then fill them in and justify why I did it later on. And look, in saying that as well, mate, there was a lot of times I remember I used to talk to the bosses, and like you said, you just sometimes you just get in and do the job, but a lot of the times I would give feedback. So they would get me to do something. I go, oh, I don't think that's a good idea. But anyway, I always went ahead and did it, and see what pans out. But I said to him one day, I said to the superintendent one day, I must really piss you off a lot of the time because I do question a lot of the stuff. He goes, no, he said, you're one of the actually good ones. The reason is because you still go ahead and do the job that we asked you. And that's what we need you to do. So it's, you all you do is just give us feedback. So, which was pretty good, I think. But anyway, mate, you keep going. So that was just trying to explain a little bit of how you can work in those situations, and don't be afraid to actually give feedback to the bosses because I think they appreciate it as long as you don't. I mean, then they're not idiots. They're there for a reason, and they're very very smart at what they do. But they can make more informed decisions if you actually have the ability to give them feedback on why you think might be a bad call or a good call. So the more the way you communicate, the more you communicate with them, the better a police force you'll get, I believe.
Yeah. So I think we're talking about sergeant at the moment, and sergeant to me is that I reckon they're basically a linchpin in the police force. They're probably one of the most important ranks there is, because you are that first level of when people first join the police force, a sergeant is their boss. You're in charge of the people. You're in charge of where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
So to me, it's a really critical role, and with that comes a license, if you will, to question authority and question orders coming from above. And not, I would even say it's your responsibility to do that. Like, I'm not talking about being insubordinate. I'm talking about questioning things and making sure you're doing the right thing on the ground, and making sure that you completely understand the intent of the person above you who might be giving orders. The other thing is, orders don't generally come down to police. It's not that you need to go and do this. It's actually just do your job. You've got policy, procedure, and ways of doing things. You're just going to respond. Um, and the superintendent role, which is the one, or the senior sergeant, which I'll talk about in a minute. So that higher level command is more managerial. It's more of a HR senior sergeant, which I'll talk about shortly. I think, righto, we'll finish talking about sergeant.
Yep.
the rank of sergeant works across multiple different specialist areas, but they've all got the similar role in that they are the operational supervisor on the ground. Whatever that looks like, they are the ones who are the operational supervisor. I think, are you happy if I step up to now senior sergeant and explain the difference now? Like
Yeah.
once you've been that operational supervisor and you've sort of proven your stuff there, there's a promotion to the rank of senior sergeant, which is the rank that is in most jurisdictions. Well, it's in every jurisdiction around Australia, especially, and New Zealand. And that is your first managerial rank. So you're an operational supervisor as a sergeant. As a senior sergeant, you're a manager. You're very much, you're in charge of leaders at this point, and you're also the HR department, and you're the rosters, and you're basically the person in charge of making sure that the troops on the ground can do their job. So you are in charge of the structure that allows a police station to function. Senior sergeant is a hell of a job. I did it for about 6 months towards the end of it. And look, if I had stayed in the police force, it's probably likely that that's where I would have gone. It would have been to senior sergeant. I was an acting senior sergeant. By that stage, I was 4 years as a sergeant, and I certainly sort of had the understanding of how to do the senior sergeant role. So that would have been something that I've been looking at. A lot of my colleagues from that era, they're now senior sergeants or superintendents. So that was sort of where I was looking. And that role is, you may very, very rarely get involved in an operational matter, but that will be a pretty serious operational matter. But you're very much in a managerial position and coordinating responses and applying resources where they're required. I'll give you the example of the OIC of a police station, for example. Your job will to be making sure that the rosters are filled, making sure that your sergeants have an intent of, from the managerial side of the police station, what is expected, the culture of the police station. You do have a bit of an opportunity there, and your leadership to your sergeants at that stage will be more consultative, if that's a word. So you're not telling them, right, I need you to do this. Well, you might if you just need something done. I need this done, mate. However you get it done, here's my commander's intent, basically. Can you achieve this? Yep, no worries. And then a good senior sergeant is not then going to micromanage that sergeant into how that needs to be achieved.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I just muted myself. It's all good. So, bloody technology. Anyway, so I think, that's your first managerial rank. Now, the big challenge comes from the fact that you might have just been promoted to senior sergeant, and you might have been a pretty good operational sergeant. You might have been a pretty hands-on operational sergeant. All of a sudden, you need to apply trust to your sergeants and let other people supervise the operational rollout of your intent. And I'm talking in a general duties police station, your intent is that it's not even you need to do this. It's more jobs are going to roll in. We expect, there is policy and procedure set as how do we operate these jobs at a much higher level. So your operational input's fairly limited. You're very much, I love this analogy, and it's a little bit sexist, but I still don't mind it. It's a traditional view of mum and dad. Sergeant is mum. So you tell mum everything. Mum tells you what needs to be done on the ground. And then dad goes, right, we're moving to Townsville. And mum goes, right, so we're going to do this. I know it's sexist, whatever. It's a very outdated, but I still think it's applying. You tell mum everything. You consult, mum's your counsel. You only tell dad what he needs to know. So what you need to do at that sergeant level, sergeants need to sort shit out operationally and make sure everything's sweet. As a senior sergeant, you don't want to be embuggered with all the day-to-day little, what do we do here? What do we do here? You want your sergeants to do their job, to sort out the little problems within their patrol group. When it comes to disciplinary matters, there's no option there. You must report them up, and whether that's right or wrong, there is a procedure in place, and it's all about transparency, which I'm certainly for. And that is that a senior sergeant is your first prescribed member within the disciplinary space. I hate that word, space. It's a corporate wank word. But anyway, so yeah, you know what I mean.
Tell us what you really
Within
think,
that space, yeah, I know. So that senior sergeant role is you actually have to roll out the procedures that occur and carry out internal investigations is a big one that you'll do as a senior sergeant. It's your first role where you're still dealing with people, but you're not necessarily someone they can. I don't know how to say this. A sergeant is someone you go and go, oh, sergeant, I'm really struggling with this. I'm doing. They're their immediate contact for the constables. The senior sergeant is the one above that deals with stuff that has to be dealt with. It's not a friendly position. And I think that's pretty honest. It's a position that your sergeant might be a mate. They might clip you. They might do this. They might do that. But they're still just they're your shifty. The senior sergeant is a little bit more regal of a role. They're not your mate. They're someone. This is the first rank where you can't be friends with the constables on the ground. You can be friendly and you can be a good leader and all the rest of it, but you're probably not going to be real close buddy chum because you may have to make really tough calls. And this might sound controversial, and I want feedback. I want people to tell me if I'm wrong, but this is what my observations have been. A senior sergeant is the first really serious role where familiarity can really breed contempt. You need to be friendly, approachable, all the rest of it, but there may be times where you need to make very difficult calls, and that may be very unpopular with your troops. And that's where you need that courage, and you need to be very, very fair, and you need to be very transparent in your decision-making process. But it may be the first rank where you need to really make tough calls. A sergeant's role in a disciplinary thing will probably be to provide support to a constable going through something like that. A senior sergeant's role is not that. A senior sergeant will actually carry out the role of that disciplinary process. So it's a bit more operating for the department. And you can still very much be in the corner of a constable who you think's done the right thing and who you think now needs support. Absolutely, 100%. But you might need to clip people every now and then. And that's just how it is. And clip is just a term. It's the old, it refers to smacking someone across the head. We're not talking about physically assaulting anybody. It may be the process of you're instigating an investigatory process or a disciplinary process.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on senior sergeant, mate?
Yeah, mate. So there's something you mentioned there, and I failed to mention when talking about OSC of a police station, or like especially when you're a remote sergeant and all that sort of thing. A lot of those roles, not all of them, but some of them, you have to fill in. You've kind of act in that senior sergeant for a little bit when you talk about rostering, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You get that. So for anybody listening, when you do have a bush station, you might have what is it, 6, 7, 8 bush stations, and they have one senior sergeant
That's
overseeing
right.
them all.
Yeah.
And then so they're who you call to. However, usually when you're a remote sergeant, they will allow you to do a lot of that stuff. You will send your rostering and that through them to make sure, like they'll check over it, but they'll get you to do a lot of that groundwork, mainly because I mean, realistically, they're looking after what 8 different stations.
Yeah.
So it's just makes their life easier, and that's why it's important to have good sergeants underneath them.
Yeah.
Because one, it makes them look good. And mate, the other one I wanted to mention, actually, Steve Constable. I'm going to give him a mention. He was acting senior sergeant. Well, wasn't acting. He was a senior sergeant when he was out at
Jabiru.
Jabiru.
Mm.
And he, for some reason, the stars must have aligned. He had one of the best crews under him. It was the old Catherine crew. And there was Shorty, there was
Troy
Slats.
Easton, yeah, great crew. Yeah.
Um,
We don't have to name them all, but we're very,
no,
very good people. Yeah.
very they were just very competent people and had acted sergeant a lot. So I remember having a conversation with him one day because he was, of course, senior sergeant for us as well. And I said, mate, you could almost sit there with your feet up on the desk. It would be you can honestly, they're a sort of a crew where, like you said, Damo, you give them something to do and they will carry it out to the letter
Yeah.
and then get back to you. And you very rarely, if not at all, you won't have a problem.
Mate, they will just make you look good.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, and that's what I remember. I remember that as well. We were out there when he was there, and we'd just say, "Mates, I reckon approve their overtime and
Yep.
give them a there every now and then, and give them a attaboy and you'll end up a bloody commander of police, mate.
That's right.
They're going to make you look like a rock star, and that's another raging thing is the job of a senior sergeant. I know I mentioned the negative side. It's not negative. It's just a role. It's a serious role.
Yeah.
But one thing where a senior sergeant can have a massive impact on the morale of a station is by publicly acknowledging excellent work. As the officer in charge of a police station and you've got a patrol group that's dealt with a really critical incident or they've just done something really well, they might have delivered a baby. Who knows? They might have returned a package to a little old lady. Who knows what that job is? But publicly acknowledge good work. And that is, you are a very strong driver of morale as a senior sergeant if you publicly acknowledge your troops. And
Yeah.
you're at that rank where you can do it. People know who you are. That's the first rank. We might, when you first come on the road, you might call someone Sarge, but once you've been there a while, it's normally first name basis, but still with respect. Like they're still your sergeant. It
Yeah.
was never first name basis with the senior sergeant. They were seniors. They were senior all the time, or Sarge, or that, or boss. Like it was never first name basis with a senior sergeant,
Yeah.
and that's the first rank where there's a real distinction.
And
Um,
sorry, Damo, I'm just going to cut in there. We always also had a big thing that say if you were a Connie on the road and you're referring to the sergeant, you always call him sergeant in front of the troops. If you're mates and you're behind closed doors, then you could call them by name.
yeah,
But
that's true. Yeah,
and most were right. However, and that was actually something Benny Rosser really nailed in earlier on. He was very, very good at it, at making that distinction. Because he said to me, he said, "You can call me whatever you want when we're behind closed doors, but as long as he said, I expect you call me sergeant in front of the younger troops and all that sort of thing." And he used to do it to me when I was a sergeant, and he used to come out and help. He always referred to me as sergeant in front of the troops.
yeah.
And that was it's also a respect thing, and it carries on with that rank structure.
Yeah,
Sorry,
no, it's
keep going.
it's very much a respect, and you're completely right. Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. Moving up through the commissioned ranks. So in the Northern Territory, we don't have inspector rank. I know almost all other jurisdictions in Australia do have that inspector rank, and I know that a lot of the officer in charge stuff of stations, especially major stations in other jurisdictions, is at that inspector rank. We didn't have that. We had superintendent or divisional commanders, and they're basically in charge of a number of police stations or a major centre and then an area. They might be that they're in charge of a major centre, including the specialist roles that are operating in that major centre. And then you've also got um, your superintendents in charge of regions. So there'll be a region of police stations, and there'll be a number of senior sergeants underneath that superintendent, and they're called sir or ma'am. So any commissioned rank is sir or ma'am, and they're certainly not your friends. They're bosses. They might be a friend. Like it might be that you get along well with them. And outside of work, the police force is slightly different in that outside of work, you might, I don't know, share a sport team or something with them, and you might refer to them on first name basis. You might know their family. There might be family friends, whatever else. But at work, they're sir or ma'am. There's no first name basis at that level.
Yeah, that's right.
Commissioned rank is definitely something that is still very much respected. And look, I'm not an expert in what goes on at those higher ranks. I know it's very high level, dealing with very serious disciplinary matters, ensuring your senior sergeants are covering your operational response coverage, so you're responsible for that. It will be the implementation of local standard operating procedures. So it's a very much office-based role, and all of the ranks above that are. Once you hit that higher level, superintendent is still an operational rank technically. Once you hit commander, you're considered a director and you're an executive rank. Superintendents can operate as the territory duty superintendent, and there are legislative powers that superintendents, so the lowest level of commissioned officer in the Northern Territory, actually have. So your territory duty superintendent is somebody in JESC, so the Joint Emergency Services Communication Centre, who will authorise call-outs, who will oversee those remote areas after hours and things like that. You're really at that higher level, ensuring staffing. So it might be that you're looking at staff levels at different areas. So that really higher level managerial stuff. And you also have the ability to report up and report problems and represent your region to higher ranks for securing resources and things like that. You start to deal with budgets, so overtime budgets start to become a concern. And
What?
then, yeah, well, yeah, the joke used to be is if you got a bloody budget, it's your duty to blow it. Like that was, I've never had to deal with budgets, but it was like bloody hell. You've got to do the job. You've got to operationally provide troops on the ground, and if that costs money, it costs money. So
Yeah,
yeah, and then obviously we've got higher levels. Then so you've got the executive rank and all the rest of it, and that's really looking at high level strategic command of the police force, answering to government, representing the police force views, what funding needs to come down, organisational direction. So that really high level managerial stuff is what you deal with once you're up in those commander, assistant commissioner, deputy commissioner, and commissioner level. At the commissioner level, you're basically you're an extremely high level. You're one of the highest level public servants in the government, within government. Very much answerable to the minister. So those higher levels are very much removed from operational response, and that needs to be that way because you may be reporting up. You'll do a lot of media at that level, especially at assistant commissioner and above. That's really where the media will start to rip into you. At lower levels, we just give our reports. I've done plenty of talking head media responses,
yeah,
and they don't rip into us. They just go, "What happened?" And we just tell them what happened because we're operational police. We're not running the police force, and they understand that. But when you've got someone like an assistant commissioner, a deputy commissioner, or a commissioner in front of the media, that's where they will tear into you like they do a politician. Well, can you answer this as to why the police force is responding? Blah blah blah. Can you answer? Can you explain why it took police 45 minutes to get to this location? So that's where you can really be the public front face of the police force, and really be expected to provide high level reports. A lot of what you would do at that high rank would be up reporting, and you would be setting the tone downwards, and certainly seeking information downwards. So there'd be a lot of pressure that you can potentially put down to get information back in order to report to government and things like that. And I think that's what happens at those commissioned ranks. Have you got
yeah,
anything to add there? I think we'll move on to can people be promoted above their ability? And the answer is yes,
yeah.
but we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, mate. I think what you said is right. You've got to make sure, and I mean, yeah, I mean, you've got a range of different commissioned officers, but the thing is also getting the information so you can make an educated decision or or answer an educated question, or give an educated answer to a question from the media. And so that's why you'll find commissioned officers a lot of time put a lot of pressure on you, as you've spoken about. When you were dealing with the COVID thing, that they need information right away, because they need to answer those questions because the media, they don't work on the same timeline as police. We like to be structured in how we actually deliver stuff, and there's also certain amounts we'll deliver at certain times, and we've got to be quite strategic about the way we actually do that. Because sometimes you don't want the media to know about certain things or the public to know about certain things for investigative reasons. So yeah, it's a bit tricky, but I think, mate, I think you've just about nailed it pretty well.
Yeah, I think so. And look, one thing what you mentioned there about sometimes you don't want the public to know, that's not because we're hiding anything. That's because if we release stuff to the public, a witness will suddenly become threatened, or a potential offender may destroy evidence. It's not because we don't want people to know. Like once we've completed the investigation, we'll go from there.
Yeah,
But investigations have to be secret. They have to be confidential. And the reason for that is because we might set traps for offenders for them in order to, and it's not entrapment. It's
mm,
we need to extract evidence to prove that a certain matter's occurred, and we need them to be oblivious to what we know. So
yeah,
it's not that we're not hiding things from the public. It's that it's operationally we cannot have this exposed. It might even be a safety matter. We might have
yeah,
someone who wants to murder police, and we're going to say, "Well, police at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning are going to conduct a search warrant at this location." No
yeah,
worries. Well, a sniper's going to be waiting across the road and going to blow your head off the second you step out of your car. So there's a lot of operational safety and investigative security reasons why police don't tell people stuff.
Yeah.
I think a lot of normal, reasonable people will understand that, and I think a lot of other people go, "Oh, you're hiding things." It's no, like there's nothing to hide. But I'm not
Yeah.
telling you when we're going to be there because you won't. The crooks won't be there.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
So,
Like, if you, yeah, sorry, mate. Like, I know the drug squad. A lot of the times, they wouldn't even talk to some cops out on remote areas and all that sort of stuff. Until they actually went out and did the job, and not because they thought the cops would tell anyone, but just because they know if you keep it within certain circles, and it makes it fine. If somebody does get the information, then you can also track down how they got the information.
yeah,
Because
that's right. Yeah.
obviously it has happened in the past.
Yeah, and that's right. So yeah, that's just a little comment on transparency. But
Yeah,
yeah, so I think our next point, I think we've roughly explained the rank structure. So the next point was, can people be promoted beyond their ability? Absolutely, they can.
yeah,
There's been plenty of cases where people have been promoted to a position, and you just look at them and go, "My God, you're a post turtle." For those
yeah,
who don't know what a post turtle is, and I do apologize if I get it wrong, but basically, if you're walking through a paddock and you come across a fence and you find a fence post with a turtle sitting on it, they're not supposed to be there. They're elevated far beyond their station in life. Somebody's put them there. They have no business being there, and we need to remove them from there because that is not where they're meant to be. So that's what
yeah,
we call a post turtle. But anyway, I didn't make that up, but it's a bloody. I think it's an excellent little point. Um, so yeah, they've got no competency sitting on top. They can't carry out their role. So basically, there are times where people are very good police on the road. They're good operational police. They might get promoted, and all of a sudden, they're not good communicators, or they're not good at doing things as a team. So they're used to working by themselves, and all of a sudden, I'm sorry, but you're in charge of a crew. People might be very untrusting of their people below them, and as a result, become quite micromanaging and not let people. You've got to let intelligent people do their job. And
yeah,
we've said that plenty of times. I think in the leadership program episode we spoke about that.
yeah,
You've got to let talented people do their job, and some people find that really difficult to trust people to carry out their role. Where the difficulty comes in is that you are still responsible for the outcome of that role. But that's where you've got to learn to finesse, not micromanaging people with just in providing quality control by monitoring sort of what they're doing, and of
yeah,
course being across what's happening on the computer. And yeah, it is tricky, but you've got to balance that. You can't micromanage people, and you can't just abandon people and just trust them, because you've still got to maintain that quality. So that gets tricky, and that gets trickier the higher you go. You don't have a choice at higher levels. You've got to trust people below you, but you've got to remember the people below you, when you're a commissioned officer, are very experienced, well-trained police who will get shit done.
yeah,
So it becomes a little easier at that level. As a sergeant, you've really got to make an assessment call of your crew, the capabilities of your crew. But yeah, can people get promoted beyond their ability? Absolutely. We both, you and I, have been critical of the fact that a lot of the emphasis in the not so much early days, but through the middle of our careers, was put on academic ability,
yeah,
because your ability to quote legislation doesn't mean you're a good leader of a crew. You need to know that legislation and you need to be across it, but you also need to be someone who knows how to think outside the square and has different experiences, and therefore can lead a crew and let that crew do their job.
yeah. Yeah, mate. I'll just touch on that there. And look, this is you. Any academic can pass an exam. It doesn't make them a good leader. But also, just because somebody's a good leader doesn't mean they should be in that role if they don't understand legislation.
Yeah.
Which is like, it's important to know the policy and procedure and all that sort of stuff, because that's why you're in that position.
Mm.
And that's why I think more emphasis should be put on maybe a workbook or show your workings of being able to do these things as well as doing an exam. But don't put all your eggs in one basket with the exam, because unfortunately, well, we've both seen it. That people, they know their stuff, but they just aren't good leaders.
No, and it also becomes a little bit of a box ticking exercise, because I remember we had a good mate, and I'm not going to mention him, but we both know him. He was an acting sergeant for years, but he's not academic. He's just not. He's not
Yeah,
academic. He knows his stuff, but he just doesn't know how to answer an exam. And he was a bloke who used to get a bit anxious in an exam
yeah,
situation.
yeah.
He'd walk out after failing the senior constable exam and go straight back into being the acting sergeant.
Yeah, that's
There are
right.
other people who'd pass the senior constable exam with flying colours, but there's no way in Christ you'd put him in charge of the crew.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, there was plenty of that.
Yeah, I think actually, mate, I'll just one of the questions I remember in the senior Connors exam, and they because they went through it, and they said, "Oh, like you were close, but you got this one wrong. When do you report back, or when do you report, when you've attended an incident, when do you report, up to up higher?" And I said, "When I've got information." Apparently, that's not the right answer. But I said, I'm not going to, they'll find out when I'm ready for them to find out. But I'm not going to pull myself away if I'm in the middle of something because of a timeline. I
Yeah.
need to, and that's one thing. That's why I talk about policy and procedure. I kind of threw the book out the window. I did it because I could justify why I did what I did.
Yeah, you know what? I don't think you did. I don't think you actually. I know we're saying that, and it's funny, but I don't think you did. I don't think you actually threw it out the window. I think you applied it practically on the ground to the situation that you had at hand,
Yeah,
in order to solve a problem that couldn't be solved any other way. You still acted lawfully. You still acted
yeah.
within standard operating procedures. You didn't throw the book out the window.
No,
You
no.
just adapted your response in such a way that the incident was resolved with harm minimisation and offenders in custody. And so, yeah, I know we joke about threw the book out the window, but I don't think you did, mate. I
No.
think you just did your job and you did what you had to do.
Yeah, look, I'm a logical thinker, and that's why I think I did well in that role because I could, yeah, I was very logical and ethical, and I kind of, yeah, I figured the best way to do things. And look, a lot of the times, there was a couple of times that look, the other thing about policy and procedure, it's a lot of the time it's written about one incident. Every incident is slightly different, so don't be too afraid. As long as you can justify why you didn't follow it to the exact letter of what it says you should do,
Mm.
it doesn't mean you're wrong.
No,
It,
and look, I'll even add there that the exact letter of the law, you can't dictate exactly how somebody is going to respond. What you need to do is put out an objective that people can aim towards, because the classic example here is if you're driving across I don't know if anyone's driven a harvester or a lawnmower or anything in there. If you look directly in front of the lawnmower when you're driving across a big lawn, and then you get to the end of it and you look back, it's going to be a bloody question mark. It's going to be your cut track is going to be squiggly and all the rest of it.
yeah,
If you look at the other end of the field and focus on that, you will drive straight to it.
yeah,
So basically, what you need to do is you set the intent, you set the final objective outcome, and then you let people work towards that. And I think SOPs do that sometimes well and sometimes poorly. They go that
yeah,
situations need to be resolved with this as a solution. So the thing is that you come up with the practical ways of getting to that solution, and you might have to go forward and then go back a bit and then turn the corner and then walk around a tree. But eventually, you get to the way that we do business, and you achieve what you need to achieve. If you try and prescribe every step of the way, well, it's going to come undone really quickly, because you can't do that. You need to let the people on the ground solve the problem, knowing that they're working towards a goal, and your job as the boss basically is to set the goal, and
yeah.
that's it.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And look, mate, there's one other thing I want to mention when you're talking about managing. I had two Connies underneath me at one stage, and one was very good. You could give them just about anything; they would go at it like a bull at a gate, and they would do a fantastic job, and they'd do it to 95%. But then something else would grab their attention, probably ADHD, I would say. And they go off track. And so, as a sergeant, I would actually go through the job and find out that basically everything's done, but it's not quite finished off.
Yeah,
And so a lot of the time, because he was so good at actually jumping in, getting doing a lot of stuff, I used to just finish it off without saying anything,
mm,
because I was more than happy to have him in that role. Whereas the other Connie, you could give him something, and every T would be crossed, every I would be dotted. It would be absolutely perfect. By the time it got to me, it was ready to be finalized and finished. However, trying to get him to do anything extra was like trying to get blood out of a bloody stone.
Yeah.
Whereas the other one was just, yeah, he was happy. You could throw him into things. So it's about managing different personalities, as you mentioned before.
Oh, mate,
Um,
100%. 100%. Couldn't have said it better. Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
So and that's so part of being in that leadership role is learning your people underneath you and what they're good at and trying to use those strengths to get the results that you need done.
Yeah. No, mate, it's that's the leadership side of it. I think just to recap a little bit. So we've gone through the rank structure. The reason there is a rank structure,
Yep.
basically a little bit of the roles of those ranks, and especially those lower operational ranks up to the sort of superintendent, and then touching on the commissioned officer ranks and the roles of that. Which, look, I'm not familiar with exactly day to day operations as a executive officer because I've never been one. So
No.
I'd be open. Hey, listen, if there's an executive police officer listening,
Yep.
anonymously, just give us a rundown. What's the day in day out? Because I don't. I know there's a lot of up reporting, a lot of responsibility to government, but I just don't have the experience to be able to comment with any level of truth. So I'm not going to.
Well, mate,
Um,
I'm sorry, mate. I'm just going to add
yeah,
in there. I was having a good chat to. I can't remember whether it was commander or superintendent. This when I was looking after Guinea, and I made the fatal mistake of actually whinging about how many emails I got a day, and I think it was anywhere between 20 and 40 at that time. And I said, this is like, I'm basically, I'm a very well paid admin
you
officer.
ratchet strapped to your computer. Yeah,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, and he said, "Hey, Schultzy, don't feel so bad." He said, "I got about 140 to 200 a day,"
yeah,
and I'm going, "Holy shit!"
yeah.
Like, yeah, I'm not going to whinge anymore, sir.
No. So,
Yeah.
look, we can all sit down at the lower ranks, and we've got legitimate concerns, absolutely. But you've got to be mature about the conversation and understand that, mate. When you get to those higher ranks, I've got mates who are now in those higher ranks, and I've spoken to them, and the pressure
Yeah,
is unbelievable. That he said that there's a lot of the enjoyment and the fun goes away at those higher ranks. The enjoyment and the fun is within your patrol group.
yeah,
It's not when you're an assistant commissioner, you don't have a team. I'm sure you can still have coping mechanisms, but you don't have the ability to just take the piss and have a laugh with your boys or
no,
girls. Like it's you're working by yourself. You're
equally,
basically your person in charge. There's one person in charge of you. You might have a few people who you are in charge of, and they're high ranking and they've got opinions, and it would be very, very difficult work. And I'm certainly not going to take away from that. But I
no,
would
no,
love to hear. I really want to hear from a high level, or not even just I would love to hear from a commissioned police officer
yeah,
anonymously. If you trust us, we're not going to burn you. We want to hear from you. We want to know what's the role. Tell us about that high level. So anyway, yeah, we'll mate. We've hit an hour. I knew we'd be able to talk about promotions.
oh, mate, piss easy.
Yeah,
Bloody hell. Yeah, look, and in saying that, sometimes, yeah, you probably just need to give your officers higher up a bit of a break because they are under pressures, and sometimes you won't understand some of the pressures that they're under. Um, so yeah, do give them a bit of a break every now and again, and that's one thing I used to pass down to my troops when they complained about certain either superintendents or commanders and all that sort of thing. Yes, you can have a whinge, however, you've got to understand there's other things at play that we don't know about. So,
yeah. Yeah,
um,
they may not be under operational stress, like they're not getting attacked and they're not getting assaulted and all the rest of it, but they are permanently being squeezed from above and below,
yeah,
and it would be a very stressful, very high intensity administrational role.
yeah, definitely, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, for sure. And I think that's the important thing is, and like we've always said, communication is always the key. So,
yeah.
yeah, that's how it all
Good
rolls.
point, Schultz. I love it as a perfect way to finish it off. Well
Yeah.
done, man.
Well, mate, I reckon we're just about done.
Yeah, that'll do.
All right, and again, like Damo said, get in contact with us. Give us stuff to talk about. And look, thanks, Nathan. That was actually quite a good one. You inspired us to go in a bit more into depth into stuff that we haven't really mentioned before. So, yeah. So keep it coming.
Definitely. All the best. We'll talk to you next week.
All right. See ya.